Have you ever beat yourself up over something that you failed at, or convinced yourself to give up or not try to do something that you felt like doing? I've went through this vicious cycle many times, and it has all got to do with the way that our brain processes thoughts. I found a few effective ways to overcome it, and it's been very helpful for me to hit the goals in my life. By the way, I'm not pulling this info out of a textbook. These are the actual things that I've learned when I was starting my business from scratch as a 17-year-old student and growing it to be the largest web hosting provider in Singapore, eventually managing a team of 150 people before I sold the business for $30 million. As you can imagine, it wasn't a straightforward journey, and it was filled with numerous challenges. In this video, I thought I should share how I overcame the negative thought processes that happens, especially during difficult times, and how I created positive, productive thought processes. This was what I relied on to be productive, be able to attract and recruit amazing talent, lead my team, negotiate deals, and strategize effectively. The realization that I made along the way was that I also learned that these things also apply to all aspects of our lives, not just business. Using the same principles that I learned, I found that they applied to things like fitness, relationships, and personal development. Once I learned how to control my mind, I started making incredible progress in my fitness, relationships, and life in general. What I've learned is that even though as humans, we are seemingly advanced and intelligent creatures, our brains can be pretty primitive. To cope with everything that's going on in our lives can get overwhelming, and our brain resorts to using thinking patterns. These thinking patterns can kick in by default, unconsciously dictating how we behave. This can be a good thing. It allows us to very quickly react to things. If we have to spend conscious thought to process everything, we'll be burnt out pretty quickly. The problem is when these thinking patterns become negative. That can make us believe that something is true when it's not. And that is where the key lies. The way we frame and convince ourselves about things has the ability to either propel ourselves to great heights or bring us down to the depths where you feel like giving up. If you find yourself regularly engaging in negative self-talk where you're constantly beating yourself up about something bad that has happened or telling yourself you won't succeed, it's time to change the way your brain thinks. And yes, it is possible to teach our brains new tricks. There are ways that we can reprogram our brain to have more positive thoughts. But first, we must understand some of the most common negative thinking patterns. These patterns are known as distorted thoughts or cognitive distortions. But what does it mean, and what do we do with these thoughts? Well, a cognitive distortion is basically an exaggerated pattern of thought. Here's the key thing about it. Cognitive distortions are not based on facts. As a result, it leads you to view things more negatively than they really are. Cognitive distortions are actually your mind convincing you to believe negative things about yourself and your world that are not necessarily true. Our thoughts have a great impact on how we feel and how we behave. When you treat these negative thoughts as facts, you may act in a way that's based on faulty assumptions. But don't feel too bad about it. The thing is, everyone falls into cognitive distortions on occasion. It's part of being human, especially when we are feeling down. However, the thing is to be aware and to catch these cognitive distortions when they happen. Because if you engage too frequently in negative thoughts, not only will your performance suffer, your mental health can also take a hit. The first thing you will need to do is to learn about these cognitive distortions. That's your goal. You need to know who the enemy is before you can even start a battle. Once you know what these cognitive distortions are, you can start to combat them. You can learn to identify cognitive distortions so that you know when your mind is playing tricks on you. Then you can reframe and redirect your thoughts so that they can have less of a negative impact on your mood and behaviors. Here's a list of the 10 most common cognitive distortions. Number 1, overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is when we conclude that because of one bad experience, all experiences related to that will be bad. For example, if you don't like the taste of sardines and then you automatically think that you hate all kinds of fish, that's a form of overgeneralization. Number 2, filtering. Like a filter or sieve, mental filtering is when we filter out the positives of a situation and only focus on the negative. For example, imagine you were giving a presentation and then had someone from the audience just walk away and leave. Immediately, you think that it was because your presentation sucked. Fortunately, this is a cognitive distortion because we don't know why that person left. Perhaps they needed to use the restroom or needed to take a call. Don't just assume that it's all because of you. Number 3, emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is when we believe that everything we feel must be good. A good example of this is relationships. For example, it's common to feel unappreciated or unloved, but because of that feeling, we assume that our partner no longer wants to be with us. That's emotional reasoning because it's not true. In fact, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy if we allow ourselves to continue with this cognitive distortion. Number 4, personalization. This is a cognitive distortion where we take everything personally and compare ourselves with others. This happens a lot when we are with others, for example. If we get our suggestion or proposal rebutted by a friend or colleague, we think that they're out to get us. But it might just be because they think they have a better one. Number 5, polarized thinking. Also known as black and white thinking, polarized thinking is when we believe that there's no middle ground. Either something is perfect or a failure. A good example of this happens a lot in entrepreneurship. Imagine trying out something and failing and then concluding that you're a terrible entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is a massive journey of failures. You can't expect to get success all the time or even most of the time. We just have to be consistent, not give up, and keep improving. Number 6, magnifying. Magnifying is when we exaggerate the negative details of an event, making them a much bigger deal than they are. For example, you might have gotten a bad GPA when you graduate and then you think your entire life is over. Which is hardly the case. There are so many ways to thrive in life without a great GPA. Number 7, control fallacies. Control fallacies have 2 types, hyper control and out of control. If we believe we are constantly in control of everything, we are suffering from a hyper control fallacy where we feel responsible for anything and everything that happens. On the other hand, there's the out of control fallacy where we perpetually see ourselves as the victim of forces out of our control and that we are absolutely powerless to do anything. Number 8, jumping to conclusions. This is a pretty commonly known cognitive distortion because it happens so often. We tend to jump to conclusions out of haste or laziness, or simply because we choose to believe something to be true without bothering to consider all the facts. For example, if somebody bumps into you in the subway, it must be because they're out to get you. But it's most likely a case that they don't even know you exist. Number 9, always being right. Another common cognitive distortion is always being right. Is exactly how it sounds. In this cognitive distortion, we believe we are always right, and because of that, we won't even consider anything from anyone who thinks otherwise. Number 10, blaming. This is the last cognitive distortion and it's pretty common too. Blaming is when we either blame others for our emotional pain or blame ourselves for every problem. For example, if our friend asks us to go out for lunch and the place we head to turns out to be closed, we start blaming them or ourselves. The thing about these cognitive distortions is that if we don't know what they are or that they exist, we can get blindsided. But now that we know what the enemy is, we can start engaging them in battle. I'm going to list 8 steps that will help you overcome these cognitive distortions. Think of them as weapons or tools. You don't have to use all of them, but depending on what you're up against, you can pick the right tools for the job. Step 1. Be aware of your thoughts. The most important step to do is to identify and accept your thoughts. For those of you who are familiar with the practice, this is mindfulness. It's the fundamental thing to do. We have to be aware of what's happening before we can even do anything. Once we are mindful of our thoughts, we can understand which negative thinking patterns we engage with most and detach from believing that they are true. There are 2 methods that I found that can help a lot with this. If left alone to our own default behavior, nothing will change. So we must break that, and we can do that with these 2 methods. This is something that's been proven, by the way. The American Psychological Association found that mindfulness can almost immediately help with reducing stress, reducing emotional reactions, and improving cognitive flexibility. The first method is by mindful meditation. If you can, take time out, go to a quiet space or restroom or something and start a quick meditation session. Focus on your breath, then notice any thoughts that come and go. Don't fight your thoughts. Instead, acknowledge them and let them go. The second method is by deliberating, identifying the thoughts in the moment. Halt everything and try to imagine yourself from the view of a third person. Observe your thoughts. What are you thinking? Are you experiencing negative thoughts or anxieties? You can even quickly jot these down on paper or on your phone. Step number 2, turning negatives into positives. Once we have some form of neutrality or calm, we have to start processing our thoughts. Everyone has negative thoughts, so that's completely normal and fine. What's not so good is if we let our thoughts disturb us, and that's what happens when we believe these thoughts to be true. Once we begin thinking negatively about something, we may begin to accept this thought pattern and allow it to control our mind and mood. So we need to recognize these thoughts in order to start countering them with positive ones. The way to do this is by two methods. The first method is to challenge your inner critic. The next time you become aware of a negative thought, ask yourself, is this really true? Is this thought useful in any way? Asking these questions will challenge your negative thoughts and change your focus. The second method is to give a name to a thought. Created by an author and psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Siegel, this method encourages you to label a negative thought pattern when it occurs. For example, try calling your negative thought a story. This immediately frames it as not reality, which causes you to be less likely to believe it. Hopefully this shows you that we have real ways to not just identify and also combat our negative thoughts. The next step is really important and one of the ways that I found to be very helpful for myself. And that's step number 3, to understand what triggers you. Everyone has triggers. They can be certain people, places, and things in life. Once we experience them, these triggers can set into motion a seemingly constant rush of negative thoughts. It could be a colleague that pisses us off, or the way someone says something to us. It can even be the way we get treated as a customer. Identifying what triggers you will equip you with the tools you need to control and properly manage these emotions. The best method to overcome this is to adapt the situation and your thinking. You've identified the trigger, now you need to understand what caused your emotional trigger to occur and try to change it in your favor. I like to just simply remove myself from the situation. Just tell the people around you that you need to go to the restroom or you need to take your time out. You can also change the setting by listening to your favorite music or by taking a few deep breaths until you regain control. Whatever you need to do to make yourself feel more comfortable, do it. Step 4, create a personal mantra. Thinking negatively can be a downward spiral. We start belittling ourselves and even talk ourselves out of doing things because of these negative thoughts. Personal mantras have been known to challenge these thoughts effectively. David Goggins tells himself he's the hardest human ever made.
Every day I tell myself, I used to believe I was the weakest man that God ever created. So now I believe that I'm the hardest human being that God ever made. I don't care if it's true or not. It's the most important conversation to me. It's the thing that drives me every day. It's the one thing that keeps me going every day, is that you must constantly be that man that...
Who loves shouting at himself like he's his own drill sergeant.
22!
Who's gonna carry the boats and the logs?
That's you, buddy. Come on, 23! Come on, 24! One more, David!
No matter what words we use, as long as it's positive, we can repeat mantras whenever you feel negativity creeping into your mind. Step 5. Practicing daily gratitude. I feel that one of the sad things about how our mind works is the way that they adapt and get accustomed to things. This is a great way to cope with all the stimuli that happens in life because there's just so much that it will be impossible for our minds to constantly process. However, this means that we also adapt to and get used to the nice things around us and how good life is. A way around this is to develop a daily gratitude practice. Don't roll your eyes, it sounds woo-woo, but it does help. Again, don't take my words for it, but studies have shown that gratitude will cause you to have higher levels of performance, optimism, happiness, joy, and pleasure. Even just a few seconds a day will ground us and help frame things in our lives. Take note of all the positives in your life, from your loved ones, family members, and pets to your good health and meaningful studies or work. You can even start a gratitude journal to record these thoughts or have self-discovery questions to help spark inspiration. Even better, you can even send a note or tell someone about how they have impacted you positively. Step 6 is paying it back. Following up on our previous step, to take gratitude one step further, you can even be the person that others are grateful for. This is research-backed to show that it increases happiness levels, and happiness increases performance. We tend to get so engrossed in our own personal lives because it's so hectic already, but if we take ourselves out of it for a moment and try to make someone else's life better, we end up feeling happier. It's strange, but putting a smile on someone else's face actually helps us forget about the negative thoughts that may be in our minds. It can be something as small as smiling at someone you pass on the street, or as significant as volunteering at a homeless shelter. There are many ways that you can pay it forward. Here are some of the ways. You could pay for someone else's coffee, you can participate in a beach cleanup, you can call your parents or loved ones after work. You can bake cookies for your classmates, you can donate old clothes, you can even go support a local artist or a local small business. Step number 7 is to switch up your environment. Our thought patterns have a lot to do with the world around us. If you find that a certain setting makes you stressed or depressed, consider switching up your environment. Whether this means changing jobs or going for a walk during lunch, it's important to give your mind the freedom and confidence to leave a situation if needed. Here are some ways you can switch up your environment. Number 1, spend time in nature. Next time you're feeling stressed, have a complete change of environment. Steve Jobs famously does this a lot, by the way, by taking walks where he plans or even has meetings on. You can imitate this too. Do things like heading outside for walks or go to a park or beach. According to the American Heart Association, spending time in nature can help relieve stress and anxiety. You can also spend time with positive people. If you find that people around you are weighing you down, consider taking a step back and turning to more positive companions. Having a network of supportive friends can improve your ability to bypass negative thinking patterns. Step number 8, develop a morning routine. Your thoughts begin the moment you wake up, so it's important to develop a morning routine that allows you to take control of those thought patterns. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, having a morning routine can increase your energy, productivity, and positivity. I found that developing a consistent morning routine helped me create an environment that set the stage for the rest of the day. And here are just some ideas to include into your morning routine. Number 1, you can go get some natural light. A short walk outdoors is great for this. Number 2, you can get some exercise. You can go to the gym or just do some body weight exercises. Number 3, you can hydrate by drinking lots of water. Number 4, avoiding technology is also a good thing, so don't use your phone the moment you wake up. Read a book or do some chores. You can also meditate, which is really easy to do these days because there are even apps that guide you to meditate. Negative thinking patterns that become habitual can feel difficult to break. But if you practice these tips, you can actually not just identify and stop these negative thought patterns, but even create positive ones in place of them. But if you practice these tips, you can actually not just identify and stop these negative thought patterns, but even create positive ones in place of them. This will stop you from simply beating yourself up every time you face an obstacle and help you actually find productive ways to get to your goals. One of my previous videos was on hitting goals, which is a video that I'll link somewhere here, but I realized people don't just need to know how to hit goals successfully. They also need to be the right person with the right thought processes. Too many times people just talk about the tactical ways of getting to goals, but a fundamental pillar that's necessary is for us to have the right mind space in the first place. I hope this video helps, and I love to hear your comments. Are these useful, and what are you going to be working on? If you have something that I can help to cover, drop that in your comments as well. Once again, remember to like this video, for the algo, and subscribe so that you won't miss my next video. I'll catch you real soon. Bye!